Welcome to the Humankind tutorial series where we'll give you a rundown of the different parts of the game. In this one, you'll learn some basic mechanics like movement, advancing out of the Neolithic era, and early game tips and tricks. Everybody in Humankind starts off as a Neolithic tribe, and the goal in this stage is to make it up to the Ancient Era. How do you do that? Well, you'll have to gain era stars. You gain era stars by completing objectives, which you can see up here in the top left corner of your screen. Before we get into what these objectives are, though, you'll have to learn to navigate the map. To move your units, select the group, then select the tile you'd like to move to. Different units have different numbers of movement points, and once you're out, you'll have to wait until the next turn to move again. These guys only have 4 movement points, as you can see here, and we've used them all. Let's click the End Turn button here. Humankind is played in turns. Every player carries out their actions simultaneously during their turn. When there's nothing left to do, you must select End Turn to move to the next one. Ending a turn will refill unit movement points, advance any ongoing constructions, and top up the number of resources you produce. In each era, you'll have to earn 7 era stars out of a possible 21 to advance to the next one, except for the Neolithic era. Here, you'll have to obtain 1 of 3. To obtain a growth star, you'll have to gain population units. To gain units, you'll have to earn food, which can be found through hunting wildlife, ransacking animal sanctuaries, and sending units to these glowing curiosities with the food icon. Ransacking is pretty simple. If you find yourself near one of these markers here, select your army, then select the ransack button on the right side of your screen. Then select the sanctuary you'd like to ransack. In the Neolithic era, it'll take a turn to finish, but later down the line, depending on what you ransack, it could take longer. You can also ransack outposts, districts, and extractors, but we'll talk a little more about that in the Break the Wall video. You'll get science stars by obtaining science curiosities, similar to the food ones I just mentioned. Pay attention to the curiosities icon to know exactly what you're picking up. To earn a hunter star, you'll have to hunt wildlife. In this era, you'll find deer, bears, and mammoths, so make sure you have enough units with you to live to tell the tale. To attack an animal, select your army, then select the attack button in the army panel on the right and select the animal you'd like to attack. I'm going to hit this button to resolve the battle manually, and this will open up the battle map. Place your units in the deployment phase, paying attention to terrain elevation and type. We'll dive deeper into how battles work in the Stick 'em Up videos, but for now, just remember, high ground equals good, rivers and low ground equals bad. Just a couple extra things to think about and take with you in these early stages of the game. The foggy parts of the map are areas you either haven't discovered yet or don't have vision over. When you navigate to these areas, the terrain will become visible to you. Be careful though, because you may also discover a hostile faction, animal, or independent people. Also, different tiles on the map work in unique ways. For example, traveling on or through forests will cost more movement points than usual. Rivers work a little differently. Landing on a river tile will cost quite a few movement points, but traveling along a river will allow you to move without penalty. Hover over different tiles to see how many base movement points it'll cost to travel over them. And that should be most of the basics. Check out some of the other videos for a deeper dive into the more specific parts of the game. Now let's get to building you a big old city, shall we? In this one, we'll be chatting about placing outposts, creating and managing cities, and collecting the 4 basic resources in the game, FIMS, or Food, Industry, Money, and Science. To start, you're going to want to claim a territory by placing an outpost. To do so, just select your army, navigate to this button here, and plop the outpost down on any tile you want. It's really simple, but there are a couple things to consider. Outposts cost influence to build. In the Neolithic era, you'll gain influence by hunting and discovering science curiosities. There are other ways to earn it down the road, which you'll discover as you play the game. When placing an outpost, first you'll want to consider your proximity to your opponents. Being close to your enemy doesn't have to deter you, but just know that settling beside them may put them on edge. Secondly, elevation. Your outpost or city may be attacked one day, so it might be wise to get ahead of it and take the high ground. Think of elevation as a natural defense. And finally, resource output, which we'll talk about right away. Territories are sectioned off by dotted white lines like the ones you see here. When you place an outpost within one of these areas, the section becomes yours and is outlined by your empire's color. Be on the lookout for territories with an abundance of resources, shown by these icons on the map. The 4 main building blocks of any bustling city or outpost are food, industry, money, and science, or FIMS. Each of these basic resources can be exploited directly from the map, the amount of each depending on where you place your outposts and districts. Food will feed and grow your population, industry will affect the production speed of your city, money will let you buy stuff, and science will help your people learn new things and advance technologically. Starting out, a good bet is to look for areas with good food or industry yields, but almost every territory can be lucrative if you play your cards right. Back on the subject of outposts, you can place one in the Neolithic era, but you won't be able to convert it into a city until you've chosen a culture in the Ancient era. So what's the difference between an outpost and a city anyway? Well, an outpost can be placed on the map, like I said before, to claim the territory. You'll be able to exploit food and industry adjacent to your outpost location, and the game will show you a FIMS pre-visualization when you hover over different tiles. You'll also be able to place resource extractors, but that's pretty much it. You won't be able to grow much economically from there. Converting your outpost to a city is the solution to this problem. Building a city will cost some influence, but that's where the real growth starts. You'll gain access to both districts and infrastructures, which will allow you to increase the amount of resources your city generates and exploits. You can only convert your outpost into a city once you've reached the Ancient era. To start the conversion after you've chosen your first culture, go into your outpost and navigate to the menu that appears on the right side of your screen. If you've got enough influence, you can hit this button right here to start construction. Your outpost will instantly upgrade to a city. And remember, the first city you build will become your empire's capital. I've mentioned districts and infrastructures a few times now. Once you have your city selected, on the right side of your screen, once again, you'll see a series of hexagonal icons and a few square icons. The hexagons are districts, which are quarters that are placed directly on the map to exploit and gain specific resources. For example, let's take the Maker's Quarter, which specializes in exploiting industry and adds an industry population slot. Managing your population will be very important down the line as your population grows. For now, hit the icon to select it. Once you have it selected, you can hover over different tiles adjacent to your city center or any other applicable tiles to see which resources you'll gain from placing it there. You may also see a UI suggestion for where you'll get the most out of your placement, but it's ultimately up to you to decide where you'd like to set it down. The same works for farmers' quarters, except they exploit food instead of industry. Back to the menu, the square icons are infrastructures. These are usually upgrades to your city's resource output, but the difference here is that they are not placed on a tile. Infrastructures are straight upgrades to your city, so you don't have to worry about where to place them or what they exploit off the map. For both districts and infrastructures, hover over their icons before you queue them up to know exactly what you'll be exploiting or gaining. Once you select an infrastructure or place a district, you'll see that your constructions queue up in the order that you start them. Everything you build in your cities costs industry to complete. Let's say you earn 100 industry per turn, and the district you like to build costs 400. It'll take 4 turns to complete that district, assuming your industry income remains the same each turn. Every turn, industry is contributed to the construction and continues to do so until enough has been put in to complete it. If there's anything left over, that industry will be carried over to the next thing in your queue. The same process is used for researching technologies, only it uses science, not industry. If you're feeling a little impatient, you can also just buy out the whole construction with money, or, after some research, population. Be careful though, it can get a little pricey the further off it is from being completed. There's still a lot more to go through when it comes to city management in Humankind, so in the next one, we'll dive a little deeper into how you can make your cities more lucrative. So we've already discussed building you a nice little city to live in, but there's a lot to go over on the topic. So we thought we'd make another video covering how to keep that city on the right track. In this one, we'll cover maintaining stability, attaching territories, and exploiting luxury and strategic resources. One of the most important things you'll need to keep an eye on when it comes to your city is stability. When your people are happy and healthy, they're more productive. When they're not, well, they're not. Your stability meter shows how stable your city is. The higher you are on the meter, the more loyal your people will be. The pink area on the meter is your current stability value. As you can see though, there is another portion indicated in white. This is your target stability, which is where your stability is trending. From where you are currently, your stability will either increase or decrease by 5% every turn until it hits the target value. When your stability gets too low, things start to go downhill fast. Once you start to dip below 30% stability, your city will become unstable. Your people will become mutinous, refusing to build most districts, stability-enhancing quarters and shared projects being the exceptions, and eventually leaving altogether, and that's one more enemy you'll have to deal with. How do you maintain stability? There are a couple ways. First of all, keep an eye out for districts and infrastructures that improve the pink stability icon. These will increase stability and make your people happier. Also, try to keep the number of cities you own within the set limit. You can see how many cities you can own without penalty up here in the top right corner of the screen. If you found more cities than this number, you will receive penalties to your influence income. But what if you want to expand further? You have a couple options here. First, you can increase the number of cities you can build by advancing to certain cultures or researching new technologies. We'll talk about that in a second. You have another option though. In Humankind, you can attach adjacent territories to create larger ones, which will allow you to rule over more territory and add to the resource output of the original cities. It will also help with city management and will allow you to apply wonder bonuses to more districts if you've discovered one in your original territory. We'll talk more about wonders in the One to Remember video. To attach territories, one of them must already contain a city. Select the original city, and above the target outpost pin, you should see an attach button. If you've got the influence to spend, hit that and voila. Damn, that's one big city you've got there. Be careful though, attaching cities will cause them to grow quickly, which will also decrease stability. That's something you'll have to learn to balance. You may have already noticed some icons that look like this on the map. These are luxury and strategic resources. You use strategic resources to help create more advanced districts and units, and you can also sell them for some sweet, sweet cash. For example, horses will allow you to create mounted and chariot units. Luxury resources will provide bonuses to your empire, improve stability, and like strategic resources, can be traded too. To get your hands on them, you'll first have to research Calendar to gain access to the Artisans Quarter. We'll talk more about research in the Knowledge is Power video, so let's just assume you've already finished researching this technology. The Artisans Quarter allows you to exploit all those fancy luxury resources in your territory. To set those up, select your city, then select the Artisans Quarter and place it directly onto the luxury resource deposit you're looking for. You can also queue it up by hitting the resource icon on the map. To extract strategic resources, you'll have to research specific technologies that allow you to do so, but the extractors work just like the ones for luxury resources. City management is super important in Humankind. It's one of the main pillars of a successful empire. There's even more that goes into managing your cities, but hopefully we've provided you with all the info you'll need to go off and figure those out on your own. Good luck, your people need you. Welcome back. In this one, we're talking all about science, specifically researching technologies and exploiting the resource. In the Neolithic era, you can only get your hands on science by obtaining science curiosities. You won't have anything available to spend it on until you get to the Ancient era though, so just keep that in your back pocket until you get there. Once you've chosen your first culture, that's when you can start making use of it. After arriving in the Ancient era, the science icon in the bottom left corner of your screen will appear. This is where you'll spend your science income. New technologies will essentially give your empire access to tools to help advance your empire through history. It's how you obtain stronger units, improve districts, new resource extractors, and much more. The more advanced you get, the more resources you'll require. Hence, the need for luxury resources. Before we get into how to start researching, we need to talk about how to get your hands on science to begin with. We already mentioned that you'll be able to find some by obtaining curiosities in the Neolithic era, but the real income starts building once you've got yourself a city. Science income is slightly harder to come by at the beginning of your playthrough than, say, food or industry. Your city does not automatically exploit it right off the bat, so you'll have to place dedicated districts and complete science infrastructures to build up your income, as well as assign population to work as scientists. However, as you progress, so will your ability to exploit science. If you're looking to improve your science income, be on the lookout for anything that provides the blue atom icon here. Now, let's get into how to start researching technologies. To queue up research, just click into the menu in the bottom left corner of your screen. Select the technology you'd like to research, and it'll queue up. You can either choose from the quick selection panel that pops up immediately, or choose a technology from the full tech tree. Head there by selecting this button here. Spending science works just like spending industry does. The amount you make each turn is contributed to the target amount of the technology you want to research. The technology is completed when enough science has been contributed, and any excess will be carried over to the next technology in your queue. For example, if a technology costs 450 science, and you make 100 science per turn, it'll take 5 turns to complete that technology. 100 science will be contributed to the study until enough has been put forth to cover it. The 50 remaining science will then be contributed to the next tech in your queue. The more advanced the technology, the more science it'll cost. Also, some technologies are prerequisites for others, so keep that in mind when planning out your queue. Just a few other things to flag. Each technology is tied to a specific era. You can only research technologies from the era that you're in and before, except if you're a scientific culture. Scientific cultures have a passive ability that allows them to research technologies from the next era. We'll talk more about passive abilities in the Legacy of an Era video. Also, you can use the search bar on the tech tree to quickly filter through technologies. Here, you can use specific keywords to find technologies you're looking for fast. You can either search directly for the tech you're looking for, or use keywords that pertain to it if you don't know the name. And that's all you need to know for technologies in Humankind. Now put your lab coat on and get to researching. So let's talk about how you win a game in Humankind. Your fame score is what dictates your position in the race to victory. You can get your hands on it by doing a variety of different things. Earning era stars, completing competitive deeds, and discovering and building wonders. We'll be covering each of these things in this video. Let's start with era stars. We mentioned in a previous video that era stars function as a way to advance you through the eras, but they also contribute to your overall fame score. There are 7 different categories for you to earn era stars in, which cover the 7 different affinities in the game: aesthete, agrarian, builder, expansionist, merchant, militarist, and scientist. Within the categories, there are 3 objectives that, if you achieve them, will earn you an era star. This means there are 21 era stars available to you in each era. The objectives for each era star always relate to the affinity they correspond to. So, for example, here we are in the Ancient Era. These are the 7 different categories of objectives. Within the Agrarian Star category, you'll have to build your population up to the specified number. You can see that there are 3 era stars available. Once you acquire the specified number of population, the objective will update, opening up a new one asking you to acquire even more population units. For each era star you unlock, you'll earn some fame. The longer it takes you to achieve an objective, though, the less fame you'll receive for the era star. If you want to maximize your fame rewards, you're going to want to be quick about it. Keep in mind that earning era stars with affinities that correspond to your current culture will land you double the fame. This can really come in handy. Over on the right side of the Empire screen, you'll see competitive deeds. Competitive deeds are also objectives that you can achieve to earn fame. However, the main differences are that they don't earn you era stars and they can only be achieved once. The same competitive deeds are available to all players, so they will all be working to complete them and take advantage of their fame bonuses. This one here awards you with 50 fame for building a cultural wonder. Once you've done so, you won't gain that bonus for building any additional wonders, though you will still gain the standard fame rewards. And while we're on the topic, the final way to earn fame is by discovering or building wonders. There are two kinds of wonders in humankind: natural and cultural. Natural wonders are awesome natural structures of staggering beauty and are randomly generated across the map. When you discover a new one, you'll earn fame. If you place an outpost and build a city in a territory containing a natural wonder, you will receive economic bonuses. Hover over the wonder to see a breakdown of the resource bonuses you'll receive by settling near it. Cultural wonders, like the Eiffel Tower or Stonehenge, are constructible structures that can be claimed once you've earned enough influence. Once you've claimed a cultural wonder, only your empire can build it. Cultural wonders are what we call shared projects. Their construction can be queued up in multiple cities to cut down on the time it takes to complete them. Finally, you can only claim an additional cultural wonder once you've built your previous one. So even if you have enough influence to unlock a new one, make sure you've completed the construction on the wonder you claimed prior. And that's all for this one. Now go win yourself a game of Humankind.
Follow me.
Humankind is all about letting you create these wonderful what-if scenarios of human history. In this video, we'll dive deeper into the topics that make humankind unique: eras and cultures, cultural affinities, legacy traits, and emblematic units and districts. Humankind is separated into 6 different eras spanning human history: the ancient era, classical era, medieval era, early modern era, industrial era, and the contemporary era. We've already covered how to make it to the ancient era, so if you haven't yet, feel free to go back and watch the basics video for more info on that. Once you've gained 7 era stars within an era, except for the Neolithic, you'll be able to advance to the next. Before heading into the next era though, you'll be prompted to choose a new culture. Once you make your selection, your empire will become that culture at the start of the following turn, taking on all of its unique bonuses and traits. We'll talk about what that means right away. Every era contains a number of different cultures for you to choose from, all of which are associated with one of 7 different affinities. Cultures can either be agrarian, aesthetic, builder, expansionist, mercantile, militaristic, or scientific. Affinities determine the general gameplay orientation and usually define where a culture specializes. Affinities also come with 2 special abilities, one passive and one active. The ability changes with the affinity of the next culture you choose. For example, the ancient era Babylonians are a scientific culture. When you choose the Babylonians, you'll gain the collective mind's active ability, allowing you to convert your industry and money in a city into science. Their passive ability lets you research technologies from the classical era. Now, if you choose the Carthaginians in the classical era, you will lose the scientific ability and gain the merchant ability, because Carthage is a merchant culture. Each culture also has an associated legacy trait. Legacy traits are unique bonuses you gain from choosing a specific culture. No 2 cultures have the same legacy trait, and the bonus is something you'll want to consider when choosing a new culture. Unlike affinity abilities, you will hold on to each legacy trait you gain through the eras. By the contemporary era, you will have 6 different legacy traits, each providing different bonuses to your entire empire. Mixing and matching the different traits through the eras is part of the fun in finding a combination that works best for your playstyle. On top of affinity bonuses and legacy traits, each culture also has both an emblematic unit and emblematic district. Like legacy traits, these are unique to each culture. Your emblematic units may require some research to gain access to them and specific resources to create them. Be on the lookout for any technologies that give you access to units with a shining golden border like this one. You'll immediately gain access to emblematic districts when you choose a new culture. Emblematic units and districts work exactly like their standard counterparts. You'll queue them up in your cities. You'll place districts directly on the map and use up population and strategic resources to complete your units. The caveat is that you can only place one emblematic district per territory per culture. Just like other districts and units you can queue up in your city, hover over your emblematics to see what unique exploits and bonuses you'll receive from them. Finally, there is an exception to the topics we've mentioned in this video. When choosing a new culture, you have an additional option on top of the new cultures you are presented with. That is cultural transcendence. Cultural transcendence is when you transcend your current culture to the next era. If you've chosen the Babylonians in the ancient era, you will have the option to transcend and bring them into the classical era instead of choosing a new culture. If you want, you can keep doing this right up until the contemporary era. There are both drawbacks and benefits to doing so. The negative is that you will not gain a new legacy trait, emblematic unit, or emblematic district. You will retain the ones you had in the previous era. This means that you will not be able to take advantage of an extra trait and your emblematics may become obsolete faster. However, the main draw for transcendence is the fame bonus. The fame rewards you gain when you've transcended your culture are higher than if you choose a new culture. So you will rake in more fame than some of the other cultures that have traditionally advanced to another. We want to give you as many options as possible to play Humankind your way. Hopefully, this helps you do that.
Off we go.
In Humankind, your relationships with the other empires can be the difference between sweet victory and humiliating defeat. In this video, we'll cover the friendly parts of the diplomacy system, starting discussions, trade, treaties, and alliances. As you explore the map in Humankind, you may run into another empire at any point. When you do, you'll get a notification and the other empire's icon will appear in the top left corner of the screen, to the right of your empire info. Whenever you'd like to tend to your diplomatic relations with any of the empires, you can just select their icon here and you'll be taken directly to the diplomacy screen with that empire. Here, it looks like we've found the Zhou. Let's introduce ourselves. To do so, just hit their icon, then hit Introduce Yourself here. The other empires may also introduce themselves to you. While we're here, let's get to know this screen a little bit. Headlining your diplomacy screen is your diplomatic relations state. Once you've met the other empires, your relationship with them will be defined here. When you hover over your relationship status with another empire, you'll get an overview of the abilities that are available in this state. You'll also notice 4 different tabs near the top of the diplomacy screen. We won't get into the crisis tab in this video, so let's just focus on the other 3 for now. First up, the relations tab. Here you'll be able to declare war, which we'll talk about in the Best Enemies Forever video, and propose an alliance, which we'll get to right away. You can see an overview of your relation states and your opponent's relation states with the other empires. You can also hit this button here to see a summary of your relationship history with this opponent. The Trade tab is all about importing and exporting resources. You can purchase both strategic and luxury resources your opponent is collecting, and you can see which resources you are selling to them too. Hit this Export-Import toggle to view the relative trade routes on the map. To purchase a specific resource, hit the arrow next to the resource and hit Buy to see an overview of how much it'll cost you. Hit this button to confirm if you're prepared to pay them for it. You can also do so by selecting the icon right on the map. An important point to bring up here is that you're purchasing access to the resource, not stockpiling it. If you are purchasing 1 iron from another empire, you can build 5 constructibles that require 1 iron within the same turn. However, the option to purchase resources from another empire will be closed to you until you sign a trade treaty with them. This is where the Treaties tab comes into play. Treaties are additional accords that can be added onto a peace or alliance state, adding 1 or more diplomatic abilities on both sides of the relationship. Trade treaties affect your ability to trade luxury and strategic resources. Information sharing will allow you to share map information. Border policy affects your ability to travel through this empire's territory, and military accords affect your ability to skirmish with them. To propose a treaty, simply hit the one you'd like to enact. The other empire can accept, refuse, or counter the treaty.
Are you interested?
This sounds like a good deal. I'm not interested. Not at all. No.
So that is your choice.
If they choose to counter, you will have to pay the specified amount to enact it. If you don't want to make the payment, you can refuse the counter proposal.
No, thank you. Take your feeble proposal elsewhere.
I heard you.
Finally, to propose an alliance with another empire, hit Propose Alliance on the Relations tab. If they accept, you will open up new diplomatic abilities. These will favor closer cooperation between your empires. You will also unlock treaties that can strengthen the alliance and make information and resources more readily available to the other empire. Proposing these work exactly as standard treaties do. This is all just the beginning of the diplomacy system in Humankind. In the next video, we'll talk a little more about the more hostile side of your relationships with the other empires. We've covered how to play nice with the other cultures. Now, what about the other side of diplomacy? In this video, we're going to talk about attitude, grievances, war, and war support. Buckle up. To start, let's head back into the diplomacy screen. Up near the top right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see a word that represents this empire's attitude toward you. An empire's attitude towards your empire is determined by many different things: how large your armies are, how well you're doing overall, your proximity to them, trade, grievances, treaties, skirmishes. Nearly everything you do influences how another empire feels about you. Attitude is a good indicator of where you stand with another empire. The more positively they feel about you, the more likely they are to cooperate with you. If they feel negatively about you, trouble may be a brewing. What kind of trouble? Well, now's the perfect time to talk about hostile relationships in Humankind. Grievances represent crimes committed by another empire and provide an opportunity for you to renounce the violation or demand reparation. They can be used to either improve an empire's attitude toward you or justify a war against them.
You will pay or suffer.
Grievances can be found in the Crisis tab on the Diplomacy screen. When one appears, you'll have 10 turns to decide whether to demand reparations or renounce doing so. After that, it'll be renounced automatically. To make a decision, hit the grievance in question, then simply select your decision. Renouncing is a gesture of good faith, forgiving the other empire for their wrongdoing. Water under the bridge. You'll gain war support for renouncing, though, so it's more of a forgive but don't forget situation. We'll cover war support right away. Demands, on the other hand, are not so friendly. What you demand from the grievance entirely depends on what the grievance involves. Aggression grievances justify the demand for monetary compensation. Ideological grievances justify the demand for changes to the opposing side's civics. Intervention grievances justify the demand for changes to the opposing side's diplomatic relations. Religious grievances justify the demand for changes to the opposing side's state religion. And finally, border grievances justify the demand for territory. If you make a demand and the opposing empire refuses, things start to get a little spicy. You now have justification to start a war, which can also be done on the Relations tab. However, once you have 80 war support, you're able to declare a just war whether or not your demands have been refused.
Enough delay.
Keep in mind that you can initiate a surprise war at any time, assuming you have enough war support. But without the justification, this is seen as a barbaric act. You'll receive the traitor reputation badge, and the other empires will take note of this. Once war has been declared, armies can attack and bombard one another no matter where they are on the map. You can also move into the opposing side's territory, which normally requires the two empires to sign a treaty or playing as an expansionist empire. The war ends once one side has either accepted or forced the other's surrender, and a comparison between the two sides' war support defines the reparations the loser will have to pay the winner. So what is war support? War support represents your empire's overall morale and animosity toward another. It is measured by this bar here on the diplomacy screen and spans from 0 to 100. You gain and lose support through many different means: winning and losing skirmishes, new grievances, demands both empires have made, etc. Hover over the war support bar to see how much you are gaining or losing and why on any given turn. Once either empire's war support has hit 0, the war is over and the losing side must agree to whatever surrender terms the winner suggests. Surrender terms at the end of a war depend on how the war played out. If you won by the skin of your teeth, you won't be able to make as many concessions. If it was a landslide victory, you'll be able to demand more from the losing side. And that's it for the hostile side of the diplomacy system. There's still a lot more to cover in the game, so stay tuned to learn even more. Sometimes you've got to drop the gloves and show your enemy who's boss. This video is all about the art of battle. We'll be talking about battle management, unit stats and types, and how to come out victorious. When you come across an animal or an enemy army, you can ignore them, or, start a fight. Before diving in though, you can preview the balance of power between your army and the opponent's. Just select your army and hover over the defending units. Hover over slightly longer to preview the battle area and deployment zones, which we'll talk about right away. Let's attack these guys here. To do so, have your units selected and navigate to this button here. Select that, and then the army you'd like to attack. You can also select the army you'd like to attack while your units are selected directly on the map. First, you have the confirmation phase. Here you can either confirm the battle, instantly resolve the battle, or retreat. If you choose to retreat, your army will use up all of its movement points to get as far away from the battle as possible. Armies that have retreated on their previous turn will only regenerate a fraction of their movement points at the beginning of the following turn. They can't perform hostile actions like attacking, reinforcing, bombarding, and ransacking until the end of their next turn. Plus, they cannot retreat a second time in a row. Sometimes retreating is the best option, but not today. Let's sort this one out manually. Next up, we've got the deployment phase. The colored tiles within the battlefield represent the deployment zones of both armies within the larger battle area. Deployment is key for maximizing the potential of your troops. As you play the game, you'll learn where different units should be positioned to make the most of what they can do. We won't spoil that for you here though. What we can tell you is that you should always consider attack range, terrain type, and elevation. Some troops specialize from further away, and some need to be up close and personal to perform a meaningful attack. Different tiles sit at different elevations, and because battles take place on the same map that you play on, those elevation levels are present and make a huge difference in battle. You are always at an advantage when attacking from the high ground, and you're always in for a heavy hit when on the low ground. Terrain types like rivers and forests also have an effect on your attacks and how much damage you take when you're on them. Hover over different tiles to see more info on what those effects are. After the deployment phase, the battle starts. In Humankind, battles span multiple turns depending on how large the battle is. The more units involved, the more turns it will take. Within each turn, there are 3 battle rounds where you and your opponent will alternate giving orders. Once the 3 battle rounds are done, you'll have to wait until the next turn to continue. The number of remaining turns and rounds can be found in the top panel here. There are 2 ways to win battles. Eliminate all of the enemy units, or, as I mentioned previously, be in control of the opposing team's flag at the end of any turn. To control the flag, you must have a unit standing on the flag tile, which looks like this. Moving your units and attacking other units works just like it does out of battle. Just select your units, then select the tile you'd like to go to or attack. Before we end the video, there are a couple unit stats that you'll want to take note of both in and out of battle. Unit health is a simple one. Every unit starts with 100, and when they get down to 0, they're gone. Health is recovered over time when inside friendly territory, but you can also speed up the process by spending some money here. Movement points dictate how far your units can travel. Combat strength is a measure of how strong your units are. Attack range defines how far the unit can attack from. Vision defines how far the unit can see. Veterancy is the overall level of your units. Units gain experience when they fight other units, and once they've earned enough, they'll jump up a veterancy level. This will increase their combat strength. Upkeep defines how much money is required per turn to maintain your units. Finally, unit type defines where your units specialize. The most common land unit types are scouts, melee, cavalry, and archers. Each type has its strengths and weaknesses, so take these into account when thinking about army composition. You can see unit info by selecting them. You can also hover over their icons before queuing them up in your cities to learn more. There's still a lot more to cover when it comes to battles, so we'll go into even more detail in the second part of this one. Let's take this time to dive a little deeper into the specifics of battle in Humankind. In this video, we'll talk about reinforcements, aerial warfare, and nukes. When you initiate a battle with your opponent, it usually starts as one group of units against another. However, in Humankind, battles can expand to include more than just the attacking and defending armies. Reinforcements are additional armies that can join a battle after it has started. Once you've researched the appropriate technology, You can bring in troops from outside of the battle area to provide the initial army with a little extra help. An army caught inside the battle area will automatically be included in the deployment phase, while armies outside of the battle area will have to make their way into it. The latter units can only be included if either the tile they're headed to is part of your deployment zone, or it's your turn to give orders during combat. If your deployment zone is too small to fit all your reinforcing units, the armies will sit in a bunch until there is enough room to deploy the units individually. These units are called reserves and are visible in the Reinforcements tab on the battle screen here. From here, you can drag and drop your reserves to determine the order you'd like them to arrive. Spawn points for reserves look like this. If this tile is unoccupied, you can deploy your reserves from here on your turn. If an attacking or defending unit is standing on the tile, you will not be able to deploy your reserves, so make sure it's cleared out. Near the end of Humankind's industrial era, you'll likely gain access to aircraft. There are two families of aircraft that can be built once you've constructed an airfield: bombers and fighters, both of which can be queued up in your cities just like constructing other units. Bombers can be used to strike the opponent's cities or armies, or provide your units with fire support on the battlefield. Fighters are mostly used to support other planes and to protect your territory. They will also patrol territories adjacent to where your airfield is located. Patrolling units provide vision and protection against enemy aircrafts and will automatically interfere with any hostile airstrikes that target areas within protected territories. There is also multi-role aircraft that fill both the bomber and the fighter archetypes. Fighters and bombers can both perform airstrikes by hitting this button here when the planes are selected. However, keep in mind that everything in the vicinity of the strike will take damage, including friendly units and districts. Missiles are a simpler type of air unit that can only be used to perform airstrikes. Unlike bombers, though, missiles can't be intercepted by enemy air patrols and are always destroyed after one use, so make them count. To build missiles, make sure you have a missile silo first. You'll then be able to queue them up in your city like units and planes. Finally, let's talk about nuclear weapons. To start, you'll have to make sure you've got the nuclear fission technology researched. This will give you access to the nuclear proliferation civic that will unlock nuclear tests. To finally build a nuclear weapon, you'll have to complete at least one nuclear test national project. You'll also have to make sure you've got a missile silo built in the territory you'd like to queue up the nuke. Nuclear weapons work just like regular missiles, only they will destroy everything within a several tile radius and turn those tiles into wasteland. Wasteland tiles can no longer be exploited or built upon. And that's it for battles in Humankind. Now get out there and cause some havoc. We'll see you in the next one. Does your enemy have something you want? A nice looking territory? A luxury resource? A big sack of money? Well, have we got the video for you. In this one, we'll cover ransacking, sieging, and militia. Basically everything you'll need to take what's rightfully, in quotations of course, yours. To ransack in Humankind is to loot and pillage a section of an opponent's territory, typically recovering money and leaving it in ruins or destroying it altogether. Armies can ransack tiles if they contain buildings. Any army can ransack a tile, but your ability to do so may depend on your diplomatic relationship with the empire that owns it. To start ransacking, select your army and select this button on the right side of your screen. Then, select the tile you'd like to ransack. Ransacking will take a set number of turns, determined by your army's combat strength and the fortification value of the targeted tile. The number of turns will be indicated in the counter above the ransack tile. Once those turns have passed, you'll be awarded with resources, usually money, and the construction will be destroyed. Now let's talk about sieging. Cities have fortifications, which prevent enemy units from just entering your city and ransacking the place. It must be besieged, assaulted, and then occupied. To initiate a siege, select an army and attack any of the opposing city's walled districts. But instead of going straight into the deployment phase after confirming the action, you'll be brought to the siege phase before actually deploying your units. This phase can last multiple turns. While a city is under siege, it produces fewer resources and is hermetically sealed. Nothing gets in or out except reinforcements. During the siege phase, the attacking side will slowly construct siege weapons if they have them researched. Siege weapons will help the attacking side breach fortifications around the defending side's districts. All district tiles that are connected to a city's main plaza, plus certain special districts, are fortified. Each fortified district has its own remaining hit points. The better the city's fortifications are, the less damage it will take from a siege weapon. Once a fortified tile loses all of its hit points, it is breached. Breached tiles serve as a gateway through the city's walls. You can see how many turns it will take you to construct your next siege weapon by going into the siege menu. As you can see here, you'll have a set number of slots for each siege weapon. If your siege lasts long enough, you will fill out each of these slots, but you will not be able to construct more than the number of slots that you have. If you get that far, you should probably launch the assault as soon as possible. Now let's check in on the defending side of the siege phase. Militia units will immediately take up arms to defend their homes when their city is under siege. However, in contrast to how siege weapons are created, the longer the attacker prepares to assault, militia units will gradually abandon their posts as the siege takes a toll on the Empire's war support. A militia unit will be lost every couple of turns depending on how stable the city is. The lower the stability, the quicker you'll lose militia units. Militia units will immediately return if the siege is broken. As the attacking side, you can launch your assault whenever you'd like, but the defending side can also launch a sortie at any time. Either way, if an assault or sortie is initiated, you'll be taken to the deployment phase. This works just like it does in any old battle. Place your units where you think you'll be able to get the most out of them. The defending side will be able to deploy as many militia units as they had when the assault or sortie was initiated, and likewise, the attacking team will gain access to the siege weapons they created. There are many different outcomes and victory conditions of a siege. The attacking side can abandon the siege altogether before the assault even starts. The defending side can also surrender at any time, handing the keys to the city over to the opponent. Neither of these is the sexiest option, but both are occasionally necessary. The siege is also concluded whenever either side's units have been wiped out or the attacking side captures the defending side's flag. If the attacking side wins, they, again, take the city. If the defending side wins, they keep it. For now. Hopefully this helps you understand how ransacking and sieging works in Humankind. Now get out there, take over some cities, and cause some absolute mayhem. This is going to be a quick one, but no less important than any of the others. In this video, we're talking about narrative events and status effects. Narrative events in Humankind have unique trigger conditions. Your decisions, relationships, and overall progression can impact which events appear when. These events allow you to shape your empire and forge its story. They usually require you to make a decision and will often pose a variety of different options that will impact your empire in different ways depending on how you choose to handle them. Some narrative events can also trigger other narrative events. They could appear as direct consequences that come up right after you've made your decision, or consequences down the line, where a choice made in a previous era circles back centuries later. Hover over the different options you're presented with to see their potential effects on your empire. The choices you make can either have permanent or temporary effects. The more permanent effects can include gaining money, resources, extra units, or being forced into particular civics choices. Your decisions will also have an effect on your ideologies, which is a topic we discuss in the Keep It Civil video. The temporary effects usually involve a status being added to a city or a unit. Status effects alter the attributes of whatever they're attached to, but they only apply for a certain number of turns. After that, the city or unit's attributes go back to normal, assuming they don't have any other status effects applied to them. Some statuses inflict a penalty onto the city or unit, while others can bring benefits. For example, the Defiant status will cause the stability of your city to decrease for a certain number of turns, while the Bountiful status will apply a bonus to food production. You can find more information about the status effects applied to your cities or units by selecting them. In the city or unit menus, Navigate to the icons that look like this and hover over them to see their effects and how many turns they'll last. Status effects can be applied in many different ways, not just through narrative choices. Curiosities, civics choices, technologies, battles, sieges. Keep an eye out for them and take note. Again, this was a short one, but both narrative events and status effects are some of the main pillars of Humankind. Now that you know how they work, go write your own story and leave your mark on history. Religion in Humankind is yet another way to set your empire apart and shape the story of your people. In this video, we'll talk about faith, followers, tenets, and religious conversion. With enough population in one of your cities, you're able to create your empire's religion. Your first choice is simple: polytheism or shamanism. The former will provide you with more faith per attached territory. The latter generates faith per population. Producing faith will allow your religion to spread and will help unlock gameplay bonuses through tenets, which we'll cover right away. Regardless of this initial choice, you'll be able to produce faith by other means down the line. Holy sites are a major source of faith throughout Humankind. They're shared projects like cultural wonders, meaning they can be queued up in multiple cities to cut down on their production time. You can also gain more faith by building faith-focused emblematic districts, constructing certain cultural wonders, and more. Just keep an eye out for anything that improves the faith icon here. To find more information about your state religion, select this button here in the bottom left corner of the screen next to the Society button. Here you'll be able to see information about your state religion and change the name of it. Now, just because you're the creator of a religion does not necessarily mean you're its leader. The religious leader is always the empire that controls the majority of this state religion's holy sites. What does it mean to be the religious leader? The leader is able to choose the tenets of the state religion. Tenets represent the principles and commandments of a religion. Each tenet has a specific gameplay effect that reflects its inspiration. To choose or see your state religion's tenets, select the Tenets button here. These are your potential tenets. Hover over them to see the effect on your empire if you choose to select them. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see that tenets are organized into tiers. You're able to choose a new tenet in the following tier once your state religion has hit a certain threshold of followers. This bar here shows you how many followers are required to open up the next tier. Followers are the inhabitants of a city that follow a specific religion. Since multiple territories can be attached to a city, and since each territory can follow its own religion, cities can house followers of multiple different religions at a time. You gain more followers by growing your population and faith and spreading your religion. Finally, I mentioned earlier that you are not necessarily the leader of the religion you created. In fact, your people don't have to follow your religion at all. In Humankind, your people are able to convert to a religion that another player has created. If another religion's impact on a territory remains significantly higher than another for a certain number of turns, the territory will convert to that religion. The game will inform you when the conversion is started, so you will have time to respond by either increasing your faith production or by sending in the troops. You can select any territory to view more details about the different religious influences, faith production, and followers. Just a heads up though, religious conversion isn't always a bad thing. If your empire is converted to another state religion, you will take on the tenets of the new one. You'll gain all the bonuses that come with it, you just won't have control of the tenet choices if you are not the religion's leader. If your empire isn't focused on faith and religion, converting to another player's state religion could be in your best interest. And that's all on the topic of religion. Now get out there and find yourself some followers. Enjoy!